if you want to avoid all the sickness this winter, the snotty noses, the coughs, the colds, the sleepless nights, the fevers, the Panadol and the antibiotics, the ear infections, the grumpy, tired kids, the days off work and school and childcare, are all those memories of last winter coming back? I'm here to tell you that it doesn't have to be that way this winter. I have a free online masterclass, 3 simple ways to boost your kids' immunity to avoid a winter full of sickness. It's on demand, meaning you can register and watch it straight away or watch it at a time that is convenient for you. Head on over to naturalsuperkids.com/immune and you will be able to sign up. In the masterclass, I am covering our natural, simple and effective approach to avoiding winter infections, how to boost your family's immunity with our proven 3-step naturopathic strategy that is really easy for you to implement as a busy mum. We're going to talk about the immune depleters that you need to avoid so you're not wasting time and money building up your kids' immunity that is just being depleted by these common foods and environmental factors. I am sharing heaps of practical tips. I promise it will be an hour well spent. You can register again at naturalsuperkids.com/immune. I can't wait to hear how you find it and to give you the tips to make this winter healthier. Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast. Jessica Donovan here, and today I am picking the brains of the amazing Emily Lo, who is an occupational therapist. We're talking all things sensory challenges in kids. And we've never talked about this topic specifically on the podcast, but it's something that a lot of families are challenged with. So I'm excited to bring her wisdom to you. As I talk about in the interview, I came across Emily on Instagram. Her Instagram is OT with Emily, and she just creates some really great content sharing practical tips. And so I'll tell you a little bit about Emily before we get stuck into the conversation. Emily is a mum to a little bub. She's a caregiver to her autistic brother, and she's an experienced paediatric occupational therapist who is based in Sydney. She shares her knowledge about child development, play sensory, and therapy activities on Instagram. And her goal is to empower caregivers through education on how to support their child. So Emily has worked for the Department of Education. She's worked in international schools as an expat. She's worked overseas for not-for-profit organisations and in private practice. And she currently has her own private practice, an occupational therapy clinic in Sydney called Child-Led Therapies. She's certified in AYRES Sensory Integration. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's AYRES, DIRFloor time, SOS feeding, handwriting without tears, and therapeutic listening. So we talk about sensory challenges such as, fussy eating and the do's and don'ts when it comes to, feeding kids that are fussy. We talk about calming activities that you can do with your kids. We talk about the difference between, sensory-avoidant kids and sensory-seeking kids, over-responsive kids, under-responsive kids, and, she shares some of the theory behind OT and sensory challenges in kids. but also a lot of practical tips and advice. So I am thrilled to introduce you to Emily. Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, Emily. It's so good to have you here.
Lovely to be here.
So I'm really excited to dive into your wisdom, when it comes to OT, occupational therapy, and sensory challenges in kids. Before we get into it, can you tell our listeners a little bit more about you, about what occupational therapy is for people who might not know, and your specific approach when it comes to occupational therapy?
Sure. So I'm Emily. I've been an OT, feels like forever. So 9 years practicing now. So with occupational therapy, it's very individualized to each child, but we think about the child's job. So your child's job is to play, to learn, to take care of themselves, and we help them in all those areas if there's any challenges. Yeah. So my approach is more of a relationship kind of approach, neurodiversity affirming. So it's very individualized to the child. I think about the child's strength and their profile specifically, and I tailor my approach to that child.
I love it. And it's very much in line with, our approach at Natural Super Kids in terms of looking at, each child individually and not just kind of going with, they've been diagnosed with this condition. This is what we do. So,
Correct.
yes, love it. And I found you through Instagram. You create some really great, really engaging content on Instagram. What inspires
Thank
you
you.
to what inspires you to create the content that you do?
Look, I actually originally started making some content during COVID when I was in private practice at that time, and it was pretty quiet. I thought, it's my time to pursue my passion, which is, providing education to parents out there about what OT is all about. And I'm also a caregiver myself. So I have a little brother who has autism. So I had that kind of knowledge about, hey, I specialize in working with children, and then thinking about what do caregivers really want? What do they really want that can help them? Which is just simple tips and tricks that I am already doing. It's just about getting it out there to the parents. And I've had so much like my followers are all parents with children with special needs, and they comment and let me know how much it's helped them. They even also help me as well, because they ask about different common challenges and how I would approach it. And I make that video for them. Yeah.
Yes, I love it. So you've not only got that, professional expertise, but you've got that real life, practical, you're living this as well, which does make it, makes it easier and makes you be able to create that content much more easily because you kind of know those daily, weekly challenges as well.
Correct. And I thoroughly really enjoy it.
Yes. And for anyone listening, your Instagram is OT with Emily. Is that correct?
Correct. OT with Emily. So I make lots of videos with tips on how to help your children.
Yeah. So I would highly recommend you follow Emily over on Instagram, and we'll make sure the link is in the show notes as well. So let's talk a bit about sensory challenges. This is something we see in various ways here at Natural Super Kids. As an OT and in your work, what are some of the common sensory challenges that you see in kids?
The most common, so we have like three categories that we put the children in to help understand them all. So we have children who are what we call over responsive. So these children will immediately react to these sensations. They're over responsive. So these children are more sensitive and avoidant of the environment or the task. And then we've got children who we call under responsive. They might look a little bit more passive and take a longer time to warm up to the environment and respond to the environment. Then we've got a very common one, sensory seekers, who are very, very busy and often on the go. And they need a little bit more help with their concentration, attention to engage and participate in activities. Yeah. So those are the most common we see.
Yes.
And as an OT, we always think about functional implications, like how does it impact the child's independence? How does it impact the child's participation at school? So we really look at their learning, their self-care, so toileting, feeding, and also taking care of themselves, like showering, bathing, brushing their teeth, all those areas, and especially play. Play is a big one.
Yeah. Okay. And like, so I think, parents out there might think, oh, does my child have a sensory issue? But they're not always kind of easy to pick up. So what are some of the signs that parents might notice in kids that have sensory challenges?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I love that question. It is actually very tricky because there's so much overlapping. It could even be a personality as well. Every child is different. So I really tell parents to look at what we call the 4 A's. So this is arousal, the child's attention, affect, and action. So I'll go into more depth about it. So the arousal is the child's alertness. Okay, so there should be an appropriate amount of alertness so that you can be calm and alert to learn, an appropriate amount of arousal for you to be calm and rested. And sometimes we see children who are more sensitive to their environment be very high arousal. So they're hyper alert. Yeah. And the
Yes.
seekers also are very high arousal. And that impacts their attention, which is the next one. Is your child easily distractible? Yeah. Are they hyper vigilant? And then this is the word we commonly use in OT, which is they have difficulty modulating. So maybe their response doesn't match the task. Maybe, yeah. So that's where it's like, maybe they're moving way too fast to be successful with putting blocks together. They're just, their attention is not matching the environment. Yeah. And then the next one we looked at is the child's affect. So children who are a bit more under-responsive, they tend to be more flat, their face. And then other children, we might see maybe they're having more fearful, anxious affect in the environment. And then with the seekers, because it's very, it's a challenging one, but they might be what you call variable, which is an up and down, like very emotionally up and down. You're nodding your head.
Yes, well, I mean, this like I'm just thinking of lots of like people that like members that we work with and clients that we work with that I can kind of think of examples for all of these that you're giving.
So thinking about that. So your child's affect, and then the last one is the child's action. What we see is sometimes maybe they're a little bit more fussy, what we describe. Do they have challenging behaviors, maybe a bit more aggressive or avoidant, withdrawals? So also what we see is the action might be impulsive. They jump from one thing to the next as well. So these are some behavioral signs that might be indicating sensory challenges.
Yes. Okay, got it. Some really good examples there. And like, I'm just thinking of some common ones that like some common specific challenges that I hear from parents. For example, they hate having their socks on, or they hate having tags on their clothes. So what sort of, I guess, bucket would that fall into?
So that child will be more of an over-responsive child. You might see that their arousal is high because they're really cautious about what's going on. Are you bringing that shirt over here and making me wear it because I know it's coming and I'm going to do something about it, which is maybe they're going to action, like withdraw away. No, no, no. Or they might be a bit more fussy.
Yes. Yeah. And definitely, we definitely see that picture. And like on that example, is there a practical tip you could offer a parent that's listening and going, yes, that's my child, that they would rather be naked and running around naked without socks and without clothes tags on them? Like, obviously there's times where we need to put clothes on our kids if we're going out in the world. Like, so how can we navigate that?
That's a great question because I'm neurodiversity affirming. So I say if a child doesn't like the tag, cut the tag off. We don't have to force them to wear it with the tag. But then again, if we think about the underlying causes, so why is this child actually sensitive to the tag? Could it come from a touch processing sensitivity? Yeah, so if we tackle that and help the child actually feel calm and alert with different senses of touch, maybe that opens up capacity for the child to try different, like, clothing, and they could play dress up with their friends, and they could wear different uniforms if they're going to, play sports. So we still think about, even though we could just cut the tag off and solve the problem, which is making accommodations for our children, which is perfectly fine. But if we want them to have the skill to be able to wear something new or different that they want to, we can still help in that skill area.
Yes, I love that. And another example that I'm thinking of that we hear about a lot is like a lot of sensitivity to noise. So really easily overwhelmed in noisy environments. And of course, these are the kids that might struggle in the classroom. Um, what is that sort of over responsive as well, I'm guessing?
Yes, it is over responsive. That's right. They are what we call, like, they have a small cup, and a little bit of sound feels overwhelming. The cup is full. Yeah. And so a strategy with that, again, neurodiversity affirming, I tell a lot of educators, like, let's think about the high traffic areas. Maybe this child doesn't have to sit near the door or the window, or where people are moving past very, there's a lot of noise and busyness, and they can sit somewhere a bit more quiet. But then again, I still advocate for the child to have that capacity to manage noise when they need to, so that they can join their friends if there is a concert or something that they want to be part of. So when I am doing, like, what we call play therapy, like DIRFloor time, I try to integrate, like, the sounds in the play, and try to build on that positive experience, like positive memories around different sounds and noises. I might make it go really loud, I might make it really quiet, and make engaging, so that child realizes that it is a safe space and it's okay that different noises sound different.
Yes, I love that. And is the idea of that sort of, when they're in their, I guess, happy place and they're comfortable, kind of, exposing them to, I guess, small amounts or increasing amounts of those things that might kind of tip them over the edge? Am I sort of on the right track
Yeah,
there?
correct. Yeah. So in therapy, we're really stimulating that opportunity for them to practice one on one these situations. And then we eventually help them generalize to the real world. Yeah,
Yes,
that's exactly
yes.
spot on.
And
'Cause,
also what I'm hearing you say, like, with that cup analogy that you were talking about, is that we're sort of wanting to lighten the load, or, make sure that that cup doesn't overfill by sort of reducing things that we know might, be challenging for these kids, but then also improve their capacity to be able to deal with them, which is what OTs are all about, isn't it?
yeah, that's right. So during therapy, we are actually, what we do is we're changing brain pathways. We want the children to eventually maybe build the capacity that their cup is just right amount, and that they can take in just like everybody else, and feel the right amount of frustration tolerance, and recover themselves, or with a little bit of support. So that's what we're trying to get them to. And then again, it's perfectly okay if you have a small cup. Some of us do, and that's all right. Once they start to, like, for me and you, even as adults, if that's too much noise for me, I self help and I turn that noise down. And we can teach children that as well. And they can say, I don't like that. Can we turn it a little quieter? And that is okay. That's functional.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just thinking, I'm smiling to myself because I'm thinking I've got teenagers, 14 and 16, and we we were driving to the shopping center the other day, and they're talking, and the music is loud in the car, like they've got the music on, and I'm looking for a park, and I'm like, can we just turn that down while I'm looking for a park? And they're like, why do you need to turn the music down to look for a park? That's just another example. Like, I was feeling overwhelmed, even though it's a different sense that I'm using. Yeah, so that's, I guess, an example of me just needing to tune out that noise so that I can concentrate.
See, isn't that great? It's actually the tools that we use, and we figure that ourselves. And in OT, we actually help the child by facilitating an environment where they can build that awareness and choose their own tools to help them.
Mm,
Yeah. So we do
yes.
that in OT.
Okay, I love
We
that.
do a lot. We do a lot of regulation work, and we build their own toolbox.
Yes,
Yeah.
beautiful. And I want to pick your brains about fussy eating because I think it's probably the number one challenge that we hear from our community. When we're talking about the foods that, might benefit a healthy immune system, we have feedback from parents, but yeah, that's all great, but my child won't eat that. And so, we're all about nutrition here, but it's one thing for us as parents to be preparing healthy food, but the other part of the picture is, will our kids actually eat it? So fussy eating is a huge challenge, and I'm sure you see it a lot in your work.
I do. I do.
Yeah, and it's often linked to sensory challenges, is what we find. So can you share some practical tips on what we can do, and also what not to do when kids are fussy with food? Because there's some really terrible advice out there as well, on how to
Yeah.
deal with fussy kids.
Yeah. Yes, this one is a stressful one for parents because it really affects the child's health and well-being. And I do get a lot of children that I see for feeding therapy. One of the tips I would say not to do is hide the food because it actually creates more anxiety around it. And if the child can already smell and see, so yes, don't do that. I would highly recommend not doing that. But what I would recommend you do, and what we do in feeding therapy, is there's this myth around don't play with your food. Well, in therapy, we play with our food.
Yes, I love this tip as well. I mean, this is something
Yes,
we talk about. Like, it's okay for kids to play with food, but yeah, I'd love to hear more about your take on that.
it's okay for children to play with their food. It's okay for them to be messy with their food. Bef- um, During feeding, actually, feeding therapy, there's so much steps before the child even puts it in their mouth. And we're talking about eating it here, right? But before they're eating it, they need to see it. They need to touch it. They need to smell it. They need to interact with it. And then they taste it. Maybe they lick it or put it on their lip. And then incidentally, they taste it. And then finally, they eat it. So there's so much we have to do before they actually eat it. And I would highly recommend focusing on actually playing and interacting with it, and then build positive interactions and play around tasting it and eating it. Yeah.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
And so, like, obviously, like vegetables are a big one. And so can you give us maybe some practical examples? Say our child won't eat, doesn't eat much of a variety of vegetables. Like, what like specifically should we do in terms of playing? Should we just put a plate of vegetables out and let them play with it, or are there specific kind of
Mm.
activities that we can do?
Various specific type of activities, veggies. So it depends on the child again, because during feeding therapy, it's actually a very intensive approach where we gather a lot of information about what they're currently eating, what they're not eating. So we know what they're interested in and not interested in. And we always kind of use what they are already kind of liking and then choose a vegetable that is similar,
Yes,
maybe
got
similar
it.
shape, similar size, similar color. And
Mhm.
then you can actually tell them, oh, it's similar. And no pressure to eat it yet, but maybe they can dip it in the yogurt they like and they can mix it. They can paint with it. I did feeding therapy last week and we had some salad. So there was lettuce, and the child immediately moved away from the table and was like waving it. Bye bye. Can this go away? And instead of telling the child to, touch it and forcing their hand to it, I just took it and I just blew it and was like, oh, it's confetti, like that. And then he laughed and he was like, oh, I want to have a go. And I just moved it close to his mouth and he blew on it. And I'm like, that is success because it moved into his space. He was physically moving away from it, the table, and now he's having it close to his mouth. And then eventually, all I asked for him is to kiss it bye bye and then blow it a kiss and see you later, lettuce. And he actually touched it to his mouth. And
Yeah,
then
that's
next,
a
it
huge
takes
win, isn't it?
yeah, it takes time. So again, I think this is also a nice tip for parents. Like I think we want things to happen immediately. It actually takes time. It takes so much time, especially if we're thinking about long-term sustainability of building that skill.
Mm.
So the child like developing the skill themselves and then they generalizing it themselves. So we want them to come from intrinsic motivation rather than an adult kind of externally going, touch it,
Yeah.
touch it, touch it. They have to kind of want to touch it themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's yes, 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 totally. Because,
Yeah.
we might kind of pressure them into it,
Yes, yes.
and that might happen once. But like, I love that. Like, we
But
want
that's quick.
them. Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
like touch. It's like, oh, it's done. He's touch it today. That's quick. But if we want it to be like sustainable long term, it takes a long time, several times of trying that food.
Yeah, long-term success. And so, I think it's just reiterating, like, take the pressure off the eating part and just get them comfortable with food. Like, that was such a good example about that. That lettuce, like going from a child moving away from it to just having it in their space and it touching their lips. That's huge. But I think a lot of parents would still feel like, well, they still didn't eat it. So, but it, like you said, it takes time. And the other thing is, it's not it kids don't have to like everything as well, especially kids that are neurodiverse, like that have sensory challenges. Like they are going to have, a fairly substantial list of things that they don't like. But it's just sort of, I guess, expanding that over time.
Yes. We do work towards more variety in their diet. We want them to have, some protein, some starch, some vegetables, some fruit, definitely. But then again, it's like from a neurodiversity standpoint, we as adults, some people don't like tomato. And I'm not going to force you to have tomato. That's perfectly okay. And then just touching on how you were talking about how, it takes time. I think that's where with feeding therapy, it's a lot of parent education around like it's the expectations as well. So going to the parents and saying that, hey, it's going to take a while. And then they feel also reassured that there isn't something wrong with their child. And it's that we're expecting too much in such a short time frame. And that's also comfortable, like reassuring.
Yeah, definitely. And I get it, from the parent's perspective, because, it can be a waste of money and a waste of time, like in terms of food prep. But yeah, I think we just have to have patience and yeah, take that pressure off the actual eating. Just get them comfortable with food. So I love those tips. Thank you so much for sharing. Um, and lastly, I just wanted to pick your brain again on like some calming sensory activity ideas. So, we see a lot of kids that are maybe, wound up at bedtime, struggle to fall off to sleep, or even during the day, just that heightened energy. And we want to, sort of gently calm things down. What are some things in terms of some practical activities that parents can do for that?
Sure. So I've got a lot of videos on my OT with Emily Instagram. If you're a visual learner, you can have a look on there. So, again, I would like to reiterate that every child is different, just like me and you. So it's very individualized in OT. We take data on the child's sensory profile, and then we tailor their home program for a calming routine to them. But if we're thinking about for everybody, we want to lower their arousal so that they feel that they're so lower arousal for the nervous system. Okay. Yeah. So we might be thinking of dimming the lights. So that's visual. And then auditory wise, it could be calming and relaxing music. Usually instrumental music or an environmental music is really great. We can think of even smell. So lavender, vanilla, coconut. And then I'm going through all the senses. So we've done smell, we're going to movement now. So movement can be like gentle rocking. Sounds like we're putting a baby to sleep, but it is a primitive kind of feeling that is very calming for us as humans. And then deep pressure is also very helpful. So having a bath and then a deep pressure massage could be wonderful. And then ending with a deep pressure hug or cuddle. Some children also benefit from a smaller space. Yeah, so cuddling up with mummy and daddy, or maybe like having a reading corner, reading nook, or a tent where the child can read a book. Yeah, so those are some practical calming activities you can do for bedtime routine.
And I love that, like, just even working through the senses, I think is really helpful, because I think as parents, we know, visually what might be stimulating and calming for our child. So we can think about, moving through those senses and calming them all down. That's really helpful, those tips. And I felt really relaxed as you were just talking through them.
Thank you. But yeah, so that's actually a great tip. Just think about all the senses as you are going through different strategies for your child. And usually it's trial and error. So maybe you've put on an instrumental sound and it's apparently stimulating, and you might let's change that sound, or play around with the volume as well.
Yes.
It's all
Yeah.
trial and error.
And I think so many of us parents, in the busy modern world, are going from, bright lights, TV on, lots of noise, to, okay, bedtime, hop into bed and expecting our kids to fall asleep, within 10 minutes. So, just kind of calming the whole environment down, I think is really helpful.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I mean, I could talk to you for hours, and but I know you've got so many great resources like on Instagram as well. But can you tell us a bit more about the work you do, where people can find you if they need, or want to kind of investigate where the OT might be for them. Tell us more about the work that you do.
Yeah, of course. So I actually have my own private practice. It's called Child-Led Therapy. We are based in Sydney. If you are not in Sydney, I actually provide telehealth appointments, like through consultation. So you can definitely still book an appointment with me if you sometimes parents just have questions that they want to ask and check in, and I can definitely help with that. But if you are based in Sydney, we provide occupational therapy at the child's school. We have a clinic, childcare, and also at home.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And so I will make sure that the link to your website is in the show notes, and obviously your Instagram as well. As I said, I'd highly recommend you check out Emily's Instagram, because there's so many great practical tips. And I love, like you said before, that it's really visual. You're showing people how to do these little activities that can really help.
Correct. So I actually had a bit of a reflective moment for myself, and I was like, what do I want to see? What do I find helpful when I'm on Instagram? And it's definitely videos that have like actual activities.
Yes.
Tangible things that I can do.
Yes. Show me how to do this thing. Yes.
Real life activities. And that's what I do on my Instagram. I give you examples of what you can really do with your children.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much, Emily. Is there anything else you want to share with our audience before you go, or do you feel like we've covered everything?
I think we've covered everything. Yeah.
It was awesome to chat with you.
Awesome chatting with you too.
Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week. Before you go, don't forget about my free online on-demand masterclass, 3 simple ways to naturally boost your kids' immunity to avoid a winter full of sickness. I'm sharing my practical tips on ways that you can strengthen your whole family's immune system to avoid the onslaught of winter infections, so your family can stay healthy and well this winter. You can sign up at naturalsuperkids.com/immune.